So far in this course, I've been emphasizing the paragraph level of writing and trying to have a good topic sentence for each paragraph. And now we need to shift and look at the whole essay, and for us it's going to be like a 5-paragraph essay. We need to talk now about introductions. Well, the paragraphs that I've been asking you to write have always been connected in some way, and they can become body paragraphs where you're explaining your 3 main ideas usually in the body paragraph. But now we need to think about what could introduce readers to that body. And this video that I've put into your Blackboard is emphasizing the idea that we need 3 things. We need a hook, we need background, and we need a thesis statement. I've already talked about how the topic sentence and the thesis statement are closely connected. The thesis statement is usually more general, and the topic sentence is more specific for that paragraph. But there's a strong connection there. So right now I'm going to focus on the hook and the background. In academic writing for college, the professor has to read your paper. So many times college writers don't use hooks. But hooks are very important in the real world, where the reader doesn't have to read your paper, and you need to pull them in, to hook them in, to give them a reason to keep reading your paper. So the hook is something interesting, something strong that will make me start thinking not about your thesis, not about your main idea, but about the general topic. For example, last week I asked you to write about how your life was changed during the closing of college for the coronavirus, and I asked you to write about what happened at the beginning, the middle, and the end of that experience that lasted about a week and a half or 2 weeks. Your thesis might be that my life was changed a lot and it was a very difficult experience. But your hook will not be about that main idea. Your hook will be something about very generally connected that makes the reader stop and think. When I thought about the big changes we had during the closing, I was thinking about past history and times in my life or the life of my country where we had a huge change in our system and routine. I was thinking about World War II, and I was thinking about 9/11, September 11th, when the World Trade Center was bombed. Those were times when American life quickly changed a lot. So I could make a hook that's not about the virus and not about what happened 2 weeks ago, but it's about the general idea of a life being quickly changed a great deal. And the reason that's a good hook is because it's very strong memory. It is emotional. We feel during September 11th, 9/11, Americans suddenly got very afraid that they were being attacked, and that fear is an interesting thing that to mention in a hook and forces people to start paying attention. A lot of hooks start out with questions. Many times it's, have you ever thought about da da da? That's a popular formula in a hook. Have you ever thought about how or why American life suddenly changed after the 9/11 bombings. So we're getting people's attention by saying something strong, saying something that they can connect to or relate to directly in a personal way. We're not putting in main ideas. We're saving those for later. That's a big mistake that people make in their hook. They take their thesis and they just turn it around into a hook. Usually that doesn't work. So if my thesis is that American life was changed very strongly during the coronavirus closings, that's a nice thesis. I don't turn that into a hook. Have you ever thought about why or how American life was strongly changed during the closings? That usually doesn't work because that kind of a hook is too complicated. We need a hook that's very simple that can really grab people's attention. So if I go back to 9/11, I would say right after 9/11, America went through a big change because of the surprise bombings. A hook needs to be simple and strong. Don't make the reader have to think a lot about what you mean. Try to connect to something they already know. So I chose 9/11 because almost everybody can remember that. The hook is usually 1 or 2 sentences, and then we give very simple background information about the topic. Here's some other hooks from the video. It's nice if the hook is fairly surprising, something strong and surprising. A definition is not a good hook. A definition is too boring. Strong opinion could be a hook. Opposite opinions, I think this gets a little bit too complicated to be a good hook. The background information after the hook is supposed to help the reader prepare to start thinking about the general topic. Pretend the reader knows nothing about the topic and say very simple information that will help the reader understand the issue. So in the case of the coronavirus closings, the simple information is, for example, the United States has a flu season every year, and thousands of people get the flu. That's general background. Or several viruses have come from China, and that's background. A lot of time background is relatively historical. It's going back and looking at what happened in the past. Basic general information. It's always something that people already basically know. Don't put any new ideas here. It's something that it's just reminding them about what they already know so that when you present your ideas, they can connect it to what people already know. The thesis is kind of like a summary of the 3 topic sentences from the 3 body paragraphs that we've been working on so far. So for example, there are 3 steps in a process. There are 3 types of something, the classification. There are 3 parts of something, 3 examples of something. The thesis statement usually does not explain what these 3 things are. It just says that there are 3 steps, types, factors, issues, advantages. So it gives the main idea in a very general way. Some people make very long sentences for their theses. They want it to be like a summary. But for now, I would prefer that you would keep it relatively short, because the long ones will introduce more grammar problems for you. What the thesis does, which is so important, is it not only gives your main idea, but it explains the general structure of the essay. I'm going to discuss 3 steps. So the first paragraph, first step. Second paragraph, second step. A good thesis statement is a very direct answer to the question that the assignment is about. This thesis is fairly long, and it's actually specifying the 3 reasons why walking is the best exercise. And I think it works here because it can do it in one word. The second paragraph, first body paragraph, is going to be how it's easy. The third body paragraph is going to be how it's convenient, explaining all of that. And then a paragraph about how it's done outside. And all of these together are proving that it is the best exercise. But for your purposes, you could just say the best exercise is walking for 3 main reasons. You don't have to identify them right now. It is very tricky to identify them all in one big thesis statement. This shows thesis statements that give the 3 elements. This is great for a longer research paper or essay, but again, it can be quite difficult, and it requires a lot of grammar knowledge to do this correctly. So for you, I would just say everyone should eat lots of vegetables for 3 important elements or things, or chemicals, or whatever you want to call it. If you can specify them and list them, that's fine, but you don't have to. Let's go back now and review. The opening statement is called a hook. The hook is grabbing or catching the attention of the reader. And here are some examples. A question. Can you remember? Have you ever thought about? It's really speaking directly to the reader and recognizing that we are communicating together, the writer and the reader. Statistics can be interesting as a hook. Of course, you need sometimes to do a little research to do this one, but this is interesting. Statistic. The majority of American visitors to Canada in 2001 arrived by automobile. They didn't fly there. They drove into Canada. So that's, people haven't thought about that. They'll have to stop now and think and wonder about that. Quotations are also popular in hooks, but they're difficult to use because you have to refer to the author and sometimes the book that they came from. I avoid this usually unless you have a really interesting quotation that would really stop and make people think. This is explaining what I call the background information. And the background information is gradually leading people to the thesis statement that you want to make. Please do not try to summarize your main ideas in the introduction. This is the big mistake writers make. They don't know what to say, so they just start taking things from the body and summarizing. For the coronavirus closings, It's hard to give background information here, but I suggested that you could talk about other closings, times when things were closed in America during certain types of emergencies that happened. You could talk about holidays when things were closed. You could talk about how schools and businesses sometimes have problems when a lot of people are sick. That's general background information, but it's not about what happened in the last 2 weeks directly. Back to the thesis. Now, at the end of the introduction, this is very, very important to have a good thesis that really tells people what the essay is mainly about and what you're going to discuss, what the sections, the paragraphs are going to be about. Now, these are the more complex type of thesis here, where it actually identifies the 3 topics. But I'm saying for you, it'd be better to be more general, usually, in your thesis. So the new fitness center is an asset. An asset means advantage to our school because it provides 3 main benefits. You don't have to list them. Keep it simple is usually better. 3 main advantages, things like that. Here are 3 parts of the introduction. Again, I'm going back to the beginning, the hook. Attention getting, something strong, something interesting in the beginning, but not complicated. The hook is more an emotional thing. It makes you feel and gets your attention that way. That's how it's interesting. Hooks are not main ideas. They're connected to the issue, but in order to make them really strong and interesting, we often have to use hooks that are not directly connected. So instead of talking about closing for the coronavirus, talk about other big events that have connected effects. This is the background information. It starts very general. In our case, maybe something about people getting sick every year with the flu virus, and then gradually going up to the thesis.